So it's a little late in the day here. I don't know if I should wait a few minutes to see if anybody else shows up or if you guys want me to start. Okay, we'll just go ahead and start. This is interactive, so I'll put some slides up. If I'll be looking if any time someone has a question, you don't have to wait till the end. Just sort of catch my eye or something, and we'll go ahead. This is meant very much to be interactive. We'll get past this slide. Okay, what I want to show is if you have any questions for me, there's my Twitter handle, my LinkedIn page, and I have a Facebook page that has some of the cloud stuff I do. Let's see here. Okay, why would you want to take exams in the first place? I mean, it could be because you're going to get some sort of recognition at work, or it may be because you're exploring a new career, although I guess with most of you guys here, you've probably been doing this for a while. Mostly what I do the reason I do it is we work in a field where it's continuous learning. And for myself personally, it helps me to have the structure. It's very easy to say, well, I should, keep up on this AWS blog or something. But when you schedule an exam and you have to go through the effort of rescheduling it or something like that, it gives you a little more focus. And I think it really helps me to do that. What I kind of structured this as kind of an FAQ and trying to answer some of those questions I have there as far as I just covered kind of why, and I'll talk a little bit about the study resources, and I'll also talk about the actual process of taking them. No questions yet? Good. So here's my reasons for, and I'm going to say that these slides are all going to be published up on the site, so you don't have to take pictures or something if you feel the need. So I talked a little bit about the career opportunities. If you happen to work for a consulting firm or something, or an AWS partner, that's an issue. And then I guess one of the things that I saw was associated with each exam is in a forum where it's like the group experience of people taking that particular exam. And I learn a lot about, sort of what's going on, just kind of reading those forums and stuff, and sometimes contributing to them. So the best thing to do, I'm going to talk a little bit about, and this is sort of comparing for the different cloud providers, and there's different resources, and some are better than the others. I should also say, and I probably should have started out this, I currently have all 11 AWS certifications as well as certifications of the others clouds. So really what I'm trying to relate here today is my experiences or what worked for me. And so that's kind of what I want to share here. One of the questions I've been asked is, are there actual training education class, go to, this AWS class or that one, or have something like that. I find it personally for me, and this has been through my whole career, and not even specific to AWS, that if I go to one of those training classes and they have spend me 2 days on this, that even we're working through the labs and everything else, it's just not as sticky. I think of this more as like if you take a class in college, where what you're doing there is over a course of a semester, you're putting in time, and then the knowledge sort of accumulates and gets much more internalized. So what I usually do for study is I try to do a little bit every day. Give you a good example is, so let's say you're working on a report or something like that, and you just need a mental break. So if you've got some of these resources available to you, you can spin up a video, or you're sitting, you're running errands and you're with your wife and she wants to go into the secondhand shop or something like that. And I'm going to show some of this, because you have the stuff on your phone, or you put the iPad into the glove box or something like that, and you have a pair of earbuds, you can just do it. Or there's another example, Linux Academy is very good for flashcards. And a lot of times there are certain types of exams, like the Azure Administrator exam, that is very detail-oriented. And so it's just, you're going to have to go through those flashcards and get just used to those things, because they're going to ask you stupid detailed questions that in the real world you just Google. So there's I'll show you a little bit of some of those techniques, and I just mentioned that. The other thing I will say is when we talk about these sites, the thing to realize is that they go on sale, and they go on sale certain times. And one of the best times is when everything else goes on sale, you know, on Cyber Monday and things like that. So if you're going to consider some of these subscriptions, I mean, they'll do it some random, but look for sales. And then I'll talk a little bit about Udemy and stuff like that. But there's things you get with the subscriptions, and it also depends. And this is the way I justified it when I was talking to people at work. If you're just going to have me take one exam, you know, just get me a monthly subscription, or let's just buy it through Udemy. If your intent more is to do this ongoing, then you may be better off with a subscription. And so for me, I just do this as a subscription. So actually what I talk about and perfectly willing to answer questions about is the relative value I found of the different things. And so if you have any questions, or you have one that you particularly like that you want to know my opinion about. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to talk through some of the dominant ones, and I'm also going to talk through the resources specific to how to best study for a particular cloud area. So the first one, and this is in not order of best or worst or any, but the two top ones are A Cloud Guru, at least for Amazon, and Linux Academy. What I like about a Linux Academy, obviously A Cloud Guru started out as an AWS one, and they've done some really strong thing with branching out into Azure and GCP. But that, you know, and if you go out their site, and I can show some of this too, you'll see a lot of different things. What Linux Academy has that A Cloud Guru doesn't is because they came from Linux. I don't know, you know, it's hard to do cloud and not do DevOps. So when you're trying to get, you know, a quick course on Python, or bringing up Jenkins, or various security things, they have a more breadth of material. And so I don't think one is bad or better or worse, but I do think that they sort of fill different needs. And containers is a good example where there's, you know, A Cloud Guru is doing some stuff, but Linux Academy just knocks it out of the park as far as the amount of materials they have. The original training site, you can buy the classes through A Cloud Guru through Udemy, but what you're going to find is that there's some other things, like for instance, they have a thing on how to study that I found pretty good, and the various different things you can do with learning styles and things like that. So I'm just going to pause. I'm going to talk specifically about the different clouds. But does anybody have any questions at this point, or we're pretty good?
Excuse me. Does the A Cloud Guru give you hands-on labs?
That's a great question. They're starting to. They're feeling kind of the pressure because Linux Academy has gone big into hands-on labs, and specifically with Linux Academy, they have what they call their cloud playgrounds. They also have this thing where you get a certain amount. Basically, they run their labs in AWS. And what they'll do is they'll have a certain amount of units of compute. You get 9. And so think one unit is like probably a T2 micro or something like that. And you can set up these things, and they'll have pre-builds for, like, maybe set up for Red Hat, maybe set up for some containers type of stuff. And you get those as part of your subscription. That's an example of what you get with a subscription versus buying a particular course. And they will keep them. They'll shut them down after an hour, but it'll keep your config, and then they'll give you a little email. If you haven't used it in 40 days, they're going to essentially wipe the EBS disk that sits behind it. But if you just start it up and start it again, it just continues on. One interesting thing they recently did was it also includes Windows 2019, so you can even do some Windows stuff in there too. So I could, take a look at that. So that's the big thing. That sort of raises an interesting question. It has to do with how people learn. I think doing a lab and doing hands-on is very good as a supplement. But one of the things they started doing is they started pulling all the labs to do, and it's like Google by doing. It's all the Google labs, and you just run through Google Labs or Quick Labs or something like that. I think you need to also go through the material because the test is really not. There are some tests like Google Certified Kubernetes Administrator, where they and some of the Linux exams are like this, where they spin up an instance and they actually literally ask you to do things, right? And if that's the kind of exam you're going to take, labs is totally where you want to be. But most of these exams require some different skills than that. And so while the labs help you reinforce, you're going to struggle if all you're doing is labs. And so I would always say that the labs are important. They're usually included now a little bit more in A Cloud Guru, but they've always been included in the Linux Academy. So you definitely should do them. But they are not in any way, shape, or form enough to prepare you for the exams. So, and again, if I'm in the real world, obviously I'm just going to look out to the community, look for resources, look for blogs, hit GitHub and things like that. And the exams are a slightly different environment than that. So when someone puts when one of these courses are usually created, from what I've been told, it usually takes about 3 months. And they sort of build it from the description, and they're really focused on the things that seem to fall into each of those brackets. The other thing they do is, and this A Cloud Guru's got a bigger, stronger user community than Linux Academy, so there's a lot more student input in there. They will look at that. They will even bookmark the stuff that says, pin the notes that have to do with questions about exams, how to study and stuff that students have sent in. And so you'll usually see that. And the forum will be associated with each exam. So you'll go into the exam as you're studying the material, you'll look at that, and you'll sort of get an idea. So the structure that they put and the effort they put in to try to get the materials organized, the labs just doing labs doesn't even come close to that. The other thing to realize is that they also look at the stuff, and they use that feedback to add sections to the lab and try to keep it up to date. And I'm not doing this in a particular order, but there's some stuff I'll talk on a later slide about how you keep those exams up to date and actually when to take an exam. In other words, the materials have like kind of a half-life, and so usually there's a good time, an alignment of the stars that this is the best 3-month or 6-month window to study for this exam, because you just got past their big cloud event, right? Because they all chase their exams sort of corresponding when they have their big user conference or something like that. And so 3 months after that, everything's really good. 9 months after that, things are kind of stale, because usually, as far as new features in the cloud, which come out like every week, what you'll see is that they'll say, I'm not putting something new on for 6 months, I'm not going to catch you. But as you get to that 6 months, all of a sudden, you get caught by surprise. So there's like a sweet spot, and it varies. And if you have any questions, about how maybe I'll use a couple of examples a little later on of how I can find that sweet spot. Sound good? Enough on that one, maybe? So for AWS, as we just said, A Cloud Guru and Linux Academy are the best. And if you can't afford both, or it doesn't make sense for both, look at the other clouds, look at how much you want to do the DevOps stuff to decide which one to choose, one versus the other. I mentioned, and I think everybody in the room knows that Udemy is a way you can get cheaper courses. The thing to realize, and there was a good example on this on a Solution Architect Professional, is that what they'll tell you, AWS will tell you this, A Cloud Guru will tell you this. There's certain white papers you have to read. There's a bunch of YouTube videos. Sometimes the author of a particular course will actually, and the Solution Architect Professional, A Cloud Guru is a good example of this, will actually put links to specific white papers and videos you should watch. So that's a good thing. The other thing I'll mention on this slide is practice exams. The test simulator on the new test simulator, and this is for many of the AWS exams, A Cloud Guru is actually pretty good. It's vastly improved over the years. The test simulators on Linux Academy are okay, but they're not as good. You know, I think A Cloud Guru has sort of leapfrogged them. But that stuff is usually not enough, and I don't know how many people know about this, but there's this thing called wizlabs.com, and what you'll find on there is it says courses, but it's not courses, it's practice exams. And it's practice, and what WizLabs will do is the same thing that A Cloud Guru does, or Linux Academy. They'll reach out to the community for people who may want to author a course or have some background they think could produce a good product, and try to encourage them to write something. WizLabs does the same thing with practice exams. And so they'll get someone from the community to put together a set of 3 practice exams. They're in no sense official, but they're structured, and they're usually so the quality of those practice exams is an interesting question. Those quality of those practice exams isn't as good as necessarily what you see off the AWS practice test, but also those practice test exams for AWS tend to be actually harder than the real exam, and you've probably heard that before. So what they have at the WizLabs is a good medium. And then what happens is that they cost like Udemy, so they're only like $20, and you get like 3 exams or something like that. So the other thing to realize, and I didn't talk to, and I'll talk about it right now, is that depending on what kind of level of tests, you know, the associates are easier than the professionals, which are easier than, which are about the same as the specialty exams. What I found is that if you take an associate exam, just take A Cloud Guru, Linux Academy, only one source will be good enough, and you probably don't need to do practice exams. It's once you get to the professional level that the way they cover the material, and actually some of the material they cover, is different between the two, and I find them kind of complementary. So if you might want both, depending on what kind of exams you're taking and how you feel, how comfortable you feel with that. And that's also where the practice exams start to really make a difference. There is a time difference and complexity difference between the professional level and the associate level, and I think if anybody's taken those, you might have some sort of idea about that. Any questions about that? No? Is this helpful for you guys? Do you have?
Yes.
Okay. I just don't want to be not focused. Now I'm going to show you these other 2, and we don't spend a lot of time, but I'm showing you sort of an illustration. If you were studying for an Azure exam, A Cloud Guru and Linux Academy have some good material. Pluralsight has sort of been their go-to, but I don't. Someone mentioned, you know, labs and practice exams and things like that. You're not going to see that on Pluralsight. And then there's an equivalent thing for Google Cloud where it's sort of the same problem. So you're saying Linux Academy, A Cloud Guru. With Azure, there's also something called Measure Up for practice exams, but it's like $100 exam instead of 20. And so I really didn't, they're more professionally made, but I don't think they were that much more helpful. The other thing you can do with the Microsoft's exams if you want is they have sort of equivalent to the beta where you can buy one with a free retake or something, and sometimes they have deals on those, sometimes they don't. I talked a little bit about when's the right time to take an exam, and I think the Microsoft exams, currently last year at reInvent in September, they announced they were going to redo them and make them more role-based, kind of the way the AWS exams are. And so they sort of end-of-lifed at the end of the year all the existing Azure certifications and came up with the new ones. That sort of made everybody have to take that 3 months to create new training materials and things like that. But also what happened, and this happened at AWS when they first came out with specialty exams, is they had people initially taking them and they got all sorts of feedback, and so they kept adjusting the exams. So originally there were 2 exams and they made it 1 exam. Originally there was a transition exam and then there wasn't a transition exam. So all that churn, and you could see it out there, said this is not the time to take Azure exams. You want to wait until things sort of settle out, the community comes back, and you can sort of find out what's going on. So that's kind of where I am. I'm just waiting for things to settle down a little bit there. And Google, once again, you see Linux Academy's there, A Cloud Guru's there, Business Labs is still there. One of the things, the equivalent to Pluralsight for Azure on the Google side is Coursera. And then they have the Quick Labs, which are often, but what I often used if you want more hands-on labs than the other Linux and A Cloud Guru will give you. One of the things there I want to talk about just briefly is O'Reilly. O'Reilly is really great for books, and there are some things that are really not only available in books that you won't find a lot on online training, but O'Reilly actually has a lot of online training, more than you would think. And specifically, they have some live classes that are focused on certification. So if you were going to take any of the Google exams, you'd find that they have some live classes on, they're usually 2 days, 4 hours and 4 hours or something, and then they'll actually go through and talk about what you need to study, what you need to worry about. They might include a really primitive practice exam and stuff like that. And so I found for the Google ones that O'Reilly, they don't have anything like that for AWS, but that's an example of something where it might be different. Likewise, for the security stuff, O'Reilly's got some really good stuff there. So I talked a little bit about when you should take them. I'm trying to check here. I can talk a little bit about beta exams. Does everybody know the deal with AWS and beta exams? Okay. So they usually put one up, this is their sort of, take the car for a test drive to see if it's a good exam or not. Usually what happens is they'll announce it, and you'll have like a 30-day window to take it if you want to sign up for it. The advantage, there's positive and negatives there. The advantage of taking the beta exam, it's a half price, includes a free retake. So it's almost like a practice test. The downside of there is that since no one even knew this thing existed, there's no training materials for it. So AWS will sometimes have, like for their machine learning one, they made free all available there in some of their internal training courses and stuff, and you can do that sort of stuff online. And so if you go to it, if you look at it as more like an assessment exam, you might pass it, and the first thing you do if you hear about it, you sign up for it on the last day, because then you get 30 days to study. You don't want to take it the first day. You want to take it the last day, and the slots fill up. So if you see one and you think this is a good idea to get it half price, it's more like an assessment exam, and you go through this thing, you'll get a free retake, and you'll know what you didn't know. So you actually know what to study. So for me personally, there's no downside other than, maybe that's a bad month for you or it's the wrong time of year or something. There's no downside to taking a practice exam. A beta exam. I've taken 3 of them. I passed 3 of them. You won't ever do as good as you would if you could regularly study and there was more materials to work with, but you might pass, and it's a great way to assess, and it kind of gives you confidence to the whole process. So I'm pretty high on it. Just realize that they fill up really fast. And so if you hear about them, and you might hear about them on Twitter, they'll be on AWS blogs, and there's things like little This Week in AWS things that will talk about them and things like that. Or you might know someone that just like texts you and say, hey, there's a new one. So those kind of things. Speaking of how do you keep track of this, and I'll talk about the first one in case anybody doesn't know this. And a related thing. Originally it was if you took and passed an AWS exam, they would, you had 2 years. It was good for 2 years, and then you had to take a recertification exam. And the recertification exam was half price and half the questions and maybe not as stressful. They got rid of that in April. So, and there's some good reasons like they might have done it. But to make you feel better is they gave you 3 years before you had to do it. But the downside is that you had to take the full real exam again. There was no recertification exam, and you had to pay full price. And for the people who had certifications, what they did is they gave them a coupon for a half-price exam for every exam they had. So that worked out for me, but if not for other people. But it brings up an interesting point. And this deck here, anything that's underlined is a hot link to that topic. So you can use this. Every one of the icons you see on those little slides where I say Coursera and Pluralsight, those are all hot links. They're all clickable. So you can look at this. The deck has a way of linking to everything I'm talking about. It's all sort of captured here. So here's the thing. I don't know that anybody wants to have 11 or 13 AWS certifications. That's like a character defect or something like that. But if you do that, realize that I'm probably taking an exam every 6 weeks, and that they'll come around where you'll have to take them again, and it's almost kind of like a lifestyle. So you're probably not going to want to do that. But if you are, I can share you my experience and my life hacks to try to make that work. So I just wanted to mention that.
How do you become very good at taking tests?
That's an interesting question. I'll talk a little bit about that, and maybe I'll talk about that now. There's a certain amount of that, and I have a couple slides into it. It has to do with more with pacing. Here, I'll give you an example. So when I start one of these exams, I say, okay, I have this many minutes. I have to do them. I got 2 minutes per question, right? So I'll see there's like 80 questions, and so I say at 40 questions, I should be at 90 minutes in. And I'll just write that down on a piece of paper so I don't have to keep doing this calculation and just distract myself. And maybe I'll do it at 25% or 75%, and I'll set those, and I'll try to keep that pace. One of the things to realize is that, and this is to answer your test taking questions, one of the things I realize is that I never mark questions for review, except when I take practice tests, and I'll talk about that. What I do is, if you get a question wrong, sometimes you get a question wrong because you just, I got that, and you didn't read the little adjectives or adverbs inside the thing that sort of got you. So my feeling is even if this is something, I got this, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, I have 2 minutes to spend on this question. I'm going to check my work. I'm going to check that I actually answered the question they're asking. And rather than try to accumulate a bunch of extra time and then try to go back. This is questions front in memory. I have all the information. There's no better time to check this work than right when I'm on the question. So pace yourself across the questions, and Even if it's an easy question, just reread the question before and things like that. The other thing to realize as you do this is another test taking thing, and some of these I just sort of figured out over time from taking the test. It's not like I read a book on this. Is that when you've got one of the big differences, and I had a slide from the other guy who helped me present this last time at the meetup, but if you look at the associate level question and the professional level question or a specialty question, one of the biggest differences is how many words are involved and how much you have to read before you can even answer the question. And people wipe out on that. And the way you handle that is two ways. First of all, you look at the answers first, and then you try to pick out what's different between the answers, because there's all sorts of duplicate. So this one, this phrase is different, and this phrase, these two phrases are the same. So you try to figure out what's the significant difference between these answers. And then once you know what the difference is, you go read the question, and you look for things in the question that would tell you what to pick. And that's how you get rid of a lot of those words where you keep rereading the whole long thing again to figure out. So, that's kind of another technique to figure things out.
I figured after taking so many exams, you start to see patterns, how they ask questions.
No, so there is, and maybe there are patterns and I'm just not seeing them. But what I will say is that, and there's a good video on this on iCloud Guru about this whole exam process where he talks about this. AWS's goal is, and any of these guys, whether it's Google or Azure or some sort of ISC2 or something like that, they don't want any false positives. They just want false negatives. They're more than happy to fail someone who should have passed, but they don't want to pass someone who should have failed. And so they structure it, and they try to put these words in there to make sure you really understand things. The other thing related to that is when you get to some of the longer, harder exams, there's kind of a grit. All of us have real jobs that are beyond certifications and things like that, and sometimes you just have to sort of buckle down, and that ability to stay focused for 3 hours is another exam taking thing where you just can keep, not stress out. That's why for me the whole pacing thing, spend an equal amount of time, that just lowers my stress. I know I'm going to get through this exam. I know I'll have considered everything, and even whether it's hard for me or easy for me, they all count the same, and you sort of look at that, and that kind of what helps me make it through some of these things. Does it make sense? Is any of that helpful? Hopefully. This slide here here's some links about how they keep changing the rules for AWS, and so it's not just AWS. Here's a whole bunch of links how Microsoft keeps changing the rules. And I just read a month ago, all the exams changed on Google because they had Google Next in April, and everybody was complaining about, all the test stuff is training materials aren't right, and they didn't cover this and stuff like that. This is a slide that's just kind of interesting. This is all the exams for the 3 clouds, and I try to align them across clouds so you can see who has what kinds of exams and what kinds of areas and where they are the same and where they don't have others. And each one of these things is a hot link to the description of the exam. Again, I have a lot of that stuff. Not going to dwell on it, but I just thought it might be interesting to the audience. And I know this is an AWS Community Day, but there's a bigger picture here, and I think it helps me put things in pictures, in perspective to see pictures like this. So, there used to be a problem that AWS recently fixed, which is there was no place to take an AWS exam. Because PSI, like for instance, me personally, I come from Milwaukee. There were no Milwaukee locations you could take an AWS exam. You had to go to Madison or Green Bay or Chicago or something. That's better. So at this point, Pearson VUE covers AWS and Azure, and that's great. Google uses Criterion. Luckily, there was places for that. So I can't speak to if you read in the forums because they come from the worldwide, around the world. People will complain sometimes in the EU or some other places where South America comes to mind where they have problems finding places. So I guess at this point we can be thankful now that AWS fixed that. I talked a little bit about this. So everything I said is in here about, the last point is good. One of the things, you talked about practice exams. There's two things we have to say about practice exam. Going through a practice exam is not to memorize the answers because they won't be on the real exam. It's to give you, what does it feel like to concentrate for 3 hours? So it builds up so you know what to expect if you haven't done that kind of stuff before. The other thing is it's kind of like a study guide. And one of the things that Linux Academy does is they actually have these really fancy study guides, which are kind of cute and useful. But the way I take the Whiz Labs for a lot of these things is, and this is going to go to the point of, 10 minutes, you can start and stop them. So you can, if you've got like an hour to work on questions or a half hour, you can work on then an exam and pause it and then pick it up again. So you can use it for stamina or you can use it kind of as a study guide. And then what I do then is as I go through those questions, and I talked a little bit about when I mark things for review, in a practice exam, I'll mark something for review that I'm not sure about so that when they actually grade the practice exam, if I got it right, I know it was just lucky and I should think more about that one. So I'll use it as a marker for things like that. And I'll also, you can save them there's two, and again, this is probably pretty obvious as you guys done this before. You can save the whole thing if it comes back to a web page as a PDF and stuff like that, and then it becomes something you can save and reuse again. In the case of like the Amazon practice exams, you can take screenshots of the screens, and I highly recommend that. And then you can use those. They won't tell you which is right or wrong the way like Whiz Labs will, but at least you'll be able to check your answers again and sort of, and you'll get your score and stuff. So think about saving those and using those as studies. And then this is all my stuff about practice exams. And I just talked about the block of time. So, and I covered beta exams. In case anybody doesn't already know, the next professional AWS exam will be developer professional. That's already in the works. And rumors are that there will be a Internet of Things one coming up as a special exam too. So those kind of are on the horizon if you're just kind of planning for it. I talked a little bit about taking exams as a lifestyle. What I mean by that is none of us has time to, or even the desire to spend their weekends studying for exams. And I don't think that's particularly effective. And I talked a little bit about how you can take, and I just wanted to show you just so you, okay, if I get it open. There you go. So,
and asymmetric encryption. Briefly, because
so this is on my phone.
I mean, all that it means is that basically the symmetric just represents you using one single key to encrypt and decrypt whatever it is you're encrypting or decrypting.
So sorry about
and
that.
Asymmetric it's just referring to the idea that you can have one key to encrypt something.
Of how you can do that, and you'll go back and it will show you the videos. This is Linux Academy, and it will actually remember where your place is. So if you switch from this one to your PC, because like the labs, you can only do your PC, or to your tablet or something, you'll see the different things come up. Likewise, and this is a little bit funny, if you have like the subscription here, you'll get
also announcements this week, including Amazon Personalize is now in general availability. Amazon Comprehend Medical is now available in Sydney, London.
So there'll be things like that, and they have one like Azure this week, and they have one GCP this month, and they have one on containers. And so you'll see those kind of things. If you happen to be, let's say your wife wants to go to the resale shop, and you have your phone and you have your earbuds in your pocket, and you just, you can sort of zone out. So doing these a little bit at a time, also taking it where, let's say you're working, and you just need a break, right? And what you're doing is part of your career anyway. I'll go watch a video for 5 minutes, 10 minutes or something like that. And I'll just pick it up. And my only goal will be every day that I just touch it. I make some progress. And one of the things, I never use it, but maybe it will work for you. Linux Academy has a score scheduler where you say, I have so many hours on this day and this day, and he will create a course schedule and he will measure whether you're meeting your schedule. So that might work for some people. For me, it's just, I want to touch it every day if I can. And it's not that I set it aside. Maybe I do it in the morning, maybe I do it in this or that. And I find that that's more effective. The other thing you can do,
London and Canada regions.
You unplug that.
Migrating.
Sorry about that. The other thing you can do is, there are also podcasts you can listen to, obviously. There's an AWS podcast if you want. I find that being good in the cloud means you have to know a lot about app dev and DevOps and things. So I listen to podcasts like InfoQ and some other things, Hansel Minutes and things like that. So those kind of things are good too. Looks like I'm almost out of time. Does anybody have any questions so far, or any other questions?
So you subscribe to both Linux Academy and AWS?
I do, and Safari online as well, because I found, again, and I guess that's kind of my takeaway. I started doing Safari because I needed more stuff on big data, and there wasn't a lot of stuff on big data or Hadoop or anything. There was tons on Safari. Same thing with security. There was tons on Safari, but not so much on those other ones that were just specifically focused to the cloud or focused to Linux. The other thing I will say about Linux Academy, and another tip I can give you, is that when you go into, and I won't take the time to bring this up, but when you go into their portal and stuff, and you can say, I'm interested in AWS or containers or something, they'll give you a list of courses. They give you the list of courses in most recent first, and they actually have dates on them. So with Linux Academy, you can actually check the shelf life on something and know if it's too old, that it's suspect. Maybe it's the best thing that's out there because they haven't updated it at Cloud Guru, but maybe it's like relatively new. The other thing that Linux Academy doesn't have AWS in a week, but they do have a weekly show where they tell you what new stuff they launched and things like that. So getting a sense of the age of a course is really, really key to knowing whether the material is going to be good or not.
Where's Cloud Academy in all these? There's Cloud Academy, isn't there?
There is. I don't think there's a bunch of second tier type stuff, and what's wrong with them, edX would be another example, especially on the Microsoft side. It comes back to something you said. What's wrong with those is that while they may have videos you can watch, they don't have quizzes, they don't have exam simulators, they don't have hands-on labs. If you don't have all those other things, that's like table stakes now. That's why the fact they were getting beat up on some of the lab stuff is, I think, why Cloud Guru started investing and putting more of the stuff that Linux Academy had. Next thing we'll see on Cloud Guru is flashcards, because I think flashcards rock for certain things. Like, to give you a specific example, on the Azure Administrator exam, there is one thing where you're going to migrate some VMs. Here's a set of 3 VMs running on Hyper-V and a VMware. Which one of these can be successfully migrated to the cloud? And they would list the size of the OS disk and whether it had BitLocker on and stuff. And there were all sorts of gotchas as to whether you could migrate it or not based on that. And the only way you were going to get that was with flashcards. So it really depends on you got to know the test. And how do you know the test? You go read the forum and people who have taken the test, and they will tell you. A good example is AZ300. I haven't taken it yet. The first one of the 2 Azure Architect exams. One of the things they changed is they went more to the Kubernetes, where they actually bring up the Azure portal and expect you to do stuff. And you wouldn't know that unless someone wrote in, hey, they bring up the real Azure portal here. If you're not comfortable with that, beware. So that's kind of how you start with those sort of things. The forums are invaluable. Any other questions? Yeah.
So right now I'm studying for my second certification.
Yeah.
One of the challenges is when do I schedule an exam? Like, how do I know? Like, you don't want to schedule it when you first start studying because you may not have any idea what you're in for. But you come to a point where you want to set a date so you can commit to it.
What I usually do is my process is the first thing I'll do is I'll before I read any of the white papers or the YouTube videos or things like that, I'll go through the whole course. I'll answer the little quizzes, not maybe take the practice exam, the exam that they have at the end. That's not the same as WizLabs, but I'll go through that first. And that will give me, at least on A Cloud Guru or Linux Academy, and that will give me an idea. At that point, I'll probably schedule the exam. I won't schedule it for the next week. You wouldn't be able to get in anyway. But I'll say that, okay, I've done enough that I have a sense of how ready I am, and I know I can always reschedule it. So I'll at least get through the first pass of at least one before I schedule the exam. But then I'll schedule the exam because now that's putting pressure on me. The other thing, I usually do the practice exams like the weekend before I take the exam. So if I'm taking the exam on a Thursday, the weekend before, I figure, and this is more, I'll do this at night, I'll try to find the time, but I'll usually I can get through one exam a day, not necessarily all at once, but by that 24 hours I'm through, and I'll sort of figure, because I don't want to do the practice exams too early, because otherwise, maybe I'm not ready, but also I won't have, the experience will fade. So you want to kind of do those the week before you actually do it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my methodology.
Yeah, not too close to the exam.
Not too close to the exam, not like the day before. So what do I do the day before? Whether it's that Linux Academy study guide or those practice exams, what I'm doing the day before is reviewing that stuff. The one other thing I'll say about, and this is from the very first AWS exam I took, I had read in a forum, and it was a really good tip. When you look at an AWS FAQ, frequently asked questions, they're sort of set up like an exam would be, right? So guess what? The kinds of materials they put in an FAQ are like choice opportunity for creating exam questions. So for whatever services you think are coming in an exam, always read the FAQs for those services, because that's almost like a study guide. You can get lost, reading through the well-architected framework and stuff like that, but the FAQs are really focused. What if this happens? Or how long can a message stay in an SNS queue before it goes there? That's kind of like exam questions. They aren't exam questions, but that's a good place to spend time. The other thing I will say is, and this was true for like the machine learning exam, read the developer. If you got more time, read the developer guide, because that's another place where they're really focused on the APIs and the structure of the service, and that's where they pull their questions from. If you have the time, it's well worth it. Like the machine learning exam, it turned out to be a lot of questions about, developer guide taught about all the different machine learning algorithms and when to use them and what their drawbacks are. Well, let's just say that sounds like really good exam questions. Makes sense. So it's common sense. They're just people, and trying to test your knowledge and experience as best they can. This is, like I said, I hope not to hit that anymore. I hope this was somewhat helpful. My contact information is there if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn or have any other questions. And just decide, unlike myself, how much is enough. Yeah, pace yourself. Realize if you've passed 4 and you want to keep them, you're on the hook.
So as far as April goes, I got my first certification before April. Does that mean I have to?
You get 3 years. No, the rules are retroactive.
Okay. So I don't have a choice between 3 years and 2 years. Passing 3 years. Okay.
But you should, if you look at your certification account, if you got it before they changed it, you should have a free half-price exam there.
Okay.
So that, but not going forward. That was like I think a one-shot deal.
Okay.
When they changed the rules. Any other questions? Well, I wish you all the best of luck. It's been really helpful for me. I mean, I don't know. It's like eating an elephant, right? If they have 170, 200 AWS services, how do you keep track of everything? This is one of the ways I do it, and then I have something measurable, and I have a structure. You need to learn this and understand this and touch this, and so that's why I do it. Good luck to everybody. Thank you.